Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a presentation that tries to give some conclusions to my other presentations on American society in the 1920s. I've mentioned this in other presentations, but one of the things that I would emphasise is to dispel the myths and highlight the contrasts. There was a jazz age, and it was new and exciting. But at the beginning of the 1920s at least, half of America's population lived in rural communities, and a third of farms didn't even have running water. 60% of Americans were living on or below the poverty line. So the images of the Roaring Twenties, the skyscraper, the jazz clubs, the car, though they were representative of the jazz age and of a time of exciting change, they were not representative of American life as a whole. Far from it. Flappers did not represent American women. Again, far from it. The overwhelming number of women were either working class or else living in rural America. And there was a reaction to these exciting times, prejudice and intolerance. The cities were pushing at the boundaries of acceptable behaviour. Young people in particular, and women perhaps most visibly. The arts, including music and the cinema, were doing so too. However, rural America was very reactionary. The monkey trial highlighted the religious intolerance of Christian fundamentalists, as well as the divide between rural and urban America. Prohibition pitted rural America against urban America too. There was a backlash against immigrants, and new immigration laws discriminated against certain national groups. There was also the Red Scare and the Sacco and Vanzetti trial, which highlighted the intolerance towards left-thinking people and towards immigrants. And of course, African Americans were still not treated equally. Indeed, they were treated appallingly. The Ku Klux Klan not only existed, but was allowed to exist. As for whether the lives of Americans improved in the 1920s, well, there had to be a reason for calling the 1920s the Roaring Twenties, or the Jazz Age. Mass entertainment was a reality, with the radio, jazz and dancing. The cinema and sport became incredibly popular as well. The lives of women changed forever, or their lives were put on a trajectory to change forever, and it would come to affect more and more women. Employment seemed much more secure, at least for white Americans in the cities, even if that proved to be wrong. Wages improved, and working hours decreased. And there was a consumer boom. The car, one of the symbols of the age, opened up so many more opportunities for people. But unions were severely restricted in America. Workers in older industries suffered, and rural America was in a depression throughout the 1920s. Black Americans certainly didn't benefit at all, nor newer immigrants. But most of all is the simple fact that the majority of Americans were still living on or below the poverty line. So, it is now important for you to spend a little time reflecting on what the 1920s must have meant for different people. Think about what their lives were like, and how much or how little the Roaring Twenties or the Jazz Age had affected different groups of people. And there are 3 questions about change for you to think about in order to properly prepare for your exam. The first, just how many lives changed. The second, was America more or less tolerant? And the third, if we look at America before the Wall Street crash, had the lives of Americans improved in the 1920s? I hope that was useful for you. The student that thinks about history is much more likely to earn a top grade than the student that simply regurgitates the narrative and some facts. You have to make use of what you have learned, explaining the answers you give to different questions. And this, I feel, is where, if you're aiming high, tutorials might be useful for you. Just get your parents to get in touch with me at historymadeeasier@gmail.com. And so long as I have a slot available, I'm sure we can work something out. I'm not in this to get rich, which is just as well. But anyway, let me thank you for listening, and let me wish you the very best of luck in your studies. Cheers.